The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss. Kim Dan stepped onto Station Horizon 7 and looked around with the same expression. She would give a new shopping center back home. Not impressed. Not scared. Just mildly curious. She was 19 years old, born in Korea but raised in rural Queensland, Australia. She had brown skin from years under the harsh sun, messy hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and she wore old boots that had walked through more mud than most aliens had seen in their lives. This was the Galactic Unity Academy, the most famous school in the known universe. Students came here from 47 different species. The buildings were made of crystal and floating metal. Lights danced in colors that human eyes could barely process. Ships flew overhead in perfect patterns. Dan yawned. She was already late to orientation. Her shuttle had stopped at 3 different stations, and she had spent 2 hours looking for something that tasted like real coffee. She did not find it. This put her in a slightly annoyed mood. The station was busy. Aliens of all shapes walked past her. Some were tall and thin like sticks. Some were short and round like balls. Some had too many eyes. Some had no eyes at all. A few looked at her with curiosity. Humans were still rare here. Dan did not look back at them. She was busy checking her communication device for directions. "Excuse me," she said to a passing alien that looked like a blue octopus in a suit. "Where's the main hall?" The alien made a sound of surprise. Most new species did not speak so directly to the established races. There were protocols, forms to fill, proper channels. The UN did not know about proper channels. She also did not care. The octopus pointed with 3 tentacles toward a large building in the distance. Dan nodded, said, "Cheers, mate," and walked off. The main hall was enormous. Thousands of students sat in floating seats arranged in a perfect circle. At the center stood a stage where important-looking aliens gave speeches about unity and cooperation and the future of the galaxy. Dan walked in through the main door. Every head turned to look at her. She was very late. The speeches had been going on for 2 hours. A tall alien at the door made a sharp clicking sound. It was a Valkyrie, one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They looked like giant insects standing upright, with shiny black shells and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They had ruled the Academy's social structure for 300 years. "You are late," the Valkyrie said. "This is a serious offense. State your name and species for the record." Dan looked up at the creature. It was almost 3 meters tall. Its mouth parts clicked with barely hidden anger. "Kim Dan?" she said. "Human. Australian, specifically. Sorry about being late. Couldn't find any good coffee anywhere." The hall went silent. Not the normal silence of attention. This was the silence of shock. Humans did not speak to Valkyrie like this. No species spoke to Valkyrie like this. The Valkyrie leaned down until its face was close to hers. "You will show proper respect, mammal. Do you understand what I am? Do you know where you are?" Dan looked at those mirror eyes. She did not step back. She did not look away. Back home, she had stared down wild dogs, angry bulls, and once a very upset kangaroo. This oversized bug did not scare her. "Yeah, I understand," she said. "You're the welcome committee, and you're doing a pretty poor job of it, honestly." Somewhere in the crowd, a human girl named Park Ji-woo put her face in her hands. She had been at this academy for 2 years. She had worked so hard to make humans look respectable. And now this farm girl from Australia was going to ruin everything. The Valkyrie made a sound like breaking glass. It was the sound of pure anger. "You dare." "Look," Dan interrupted. "I've been traveling for 6 days. I haven't slept properly. I haven't had real food. I just want to sit down, yeah. Can we do the whole angry authority figure thing later?" She walked past the Valkyrie and into the hall. Nobody stopped her. Nobody knew how the EUN found an empty seat next to Jiwoo. She sat down and let out a long breath. "Hi," she said to Jiwoo. "I'm Dan. What did I miss?" Jiwoo stared at her. "What did you just do?" "What do you mean?" "You just insulted a high caste Valkyrie. In front of everyone. They control half the station's resources. They can make your life here impossible." Dan shrugged. He was rude first. Jiwoo did not know what to say. She had spent 2 years learning the complex rules of alien politics. She knew which species to bow to, which ones to avoid eye contact with, and which ones could end your academic career with a single complaint. This girl had been here for 10 minutes and had already broken every rule. Around them, aliens whispered to each other. The words spread like fire through dry grass. A human had talked back to a Valkyrie. A human had not shown fear. At the front of the hall, a group of Valkyrie stood together. Their leader was a young one named Silvex. He was considered a genius among his people. He had never met a species he could not intimidate. He watched the human girl sit down and start talking casually to another human as if nothing had happened. "Interesting," he said quietly. One of his companions clicked nervously. "Should we report her?" "No," Silvex said. "I want to see what she does next." He had studied humans in academic texts. They were supposed to be a nervous species, easily frightened, quick to submit to stronger races. But this one showed none of those signs. Perhaps the texts were wrong, or perhaps this human was broken in some way. Either option was interesting enough to watch. The orientation continued. Speakers talked about schedules and rules and opportunities. Dan listened with half attention while eating some kind of alien fruit she had found in her bag. "Is that even safe for humans?" Jiwoo whispered. "Dunno," Dan said. "Tastes all right, though." Jiwoo realized that this year was going to be very, very different. 3 weeks passed. Kim Dan became famous. Not famous in a good way, according to the Human Student Council. Not famous in the way they had planned. Lee Hyuna, the council representative, had spent months building a careful image of humans as polite, hard-working, and respectable. And destroyed that image in 3 weeks. She ate lunch with the Korath warriors, a species of giant lizard people who had conquered 12 planets. She made jokes with them. She punched one on the arm after he said something funny. The Korath did not know how to react. Nobody punched them. They were feared across the galaxy. She helped a small, nervous species called the Milvax carry their equipment. They were considered the lowest class on the station. Other species did not even look at them. Dan carried their boxes and asked about their home planet. She sat in the Valkyrie section of the library and put her feet up on the table. When they told her this section was reserved, she said, "Oh, nice," and kept reading. "She's going to start a war," Hyuna said, during an emergency human council meeting. "She doesn't understand how things work here." "Have you tried talking to her?" someone asked. "Yes. She just says she'll be right and walks away." Park Jiwoo sat in the corner, quiet. She had become something like Diane's guide over the past weeks. Or maybe her translator. Or maybe just the person who apologized after. Dan said something shocking, but she had noticed something strange. The aliens were not angry at Dan. They were confused. And some of them, secretly, were impressed. The Korath especially. They had never met a human who showed no fear. Their whole culture was built on strength and dominance. But Dan treated them like normal people. She was not afraid of their teeth, or their claws, or their reputation. This confused them deeply. And confused. Korath were dangerous Korath. The message came on a Tuesday. A formal challenge from the Korath delegation. They wanted to test human courage through their traditional trial. It was called the Path of Teeth. HYUNA read the message 3 times. Her face went pale. "This is bad," she said. "This is very, very bad." The Path of Teeth was simple. A challenger entered an arena. They faced 3 creatures, each more dangerous than the last. If they survived, they earned the court's respect. If they died, well, at least they died with honor. The survival rate for lesser species was 60%. That meant 40% died. "We have to decline," Huna said. "We'll cite diplomatic concerns, cultural differences, something. If we decline, they'll think all humans are cowards," Jiwoo said quietly. "They'll never respect us." "I don't care about their respect. I care about not getting someone killed." The door to the meeting room opened. Dayan walked in with a drink in her hand. "What's everyone yelling about?" she asked. They explained the challenge. They showed her the survival statistics. They described the creatures she would face: a predator with claws like swords, a pack of hunting beasts, and something called the Devourer that had killed 200 challengers. Dayan listened. She took a sip of her drink. "Sounds fun," she said. "I'll do it." "No." Huna stood up. "Absolutely not. This is exactly the kind of..." "Look," Dayan said. "You said if we don't do this, they'll think humans are weak, yeah? So someone has to do it. Might as well be me. You'll die." "Maybe, maybe not." Dayan shrugged. "Back home, we've got things just as nasty. Saltwater crocs, box jellyfish, drop bears." "What's a drop bear?" Jiwoo asked. "Koalas, but evil. They fall on you from trees. Very dangerous." Jiwoo was not sure if this was true. With Dayan, it was hard to tell. The challenge was set for the next evening. Word spread across the station. Aliens crowded around screens to watch. This was going to be entertainment of the highest order. A human girl, barely adult by any species standards, was going to face the Path of Teeth. Most bets were on her dying in the first round. The night before the trial, Dayan did not train. She did not study combat techniques. She did not meditate or prepare herself mentally. She played cards. A small group had gathered in the recreation area. Jiwoo was there, unable to sleep. A few Milvacs had joined, curious about the human who was kind to them. Even 2 young Korath showed up, wanting to understand this strange creature who had volunteered for Death. EU, and taught them all how to play poker. "The trick is keeping your face still," she explained. "Don't let anyone know what you're holding. This is a skill for deception," one of the Korath said. "You teach us to lie." "Nah, I teach you to survive." Sometimes survival means not showing your fear. The Korath thought about this. It was surprisingly deep for a card game. Jiwoo watched Dayan laugh at a bad joke from one of the Milvacs. She watched her tease a Korath who bet too aggressively. She watched her act like tomorrow she would not face creatures that had killed hundreds. "Aren't you scared?" Jiwoo finally asked. Dayan looked at her cards. "Yeah, a bit. You don't seem scared." Being scared and showing scared are different things. Dayan put down her cards, revealing a winning hand. The animals in the arena, they smell fear. They react to it. If I act scared, I die faster. If I act calm, maybe I confuse them. Is that your strategy? Confuse them? Dayan grinned. That's my strategy for most things, honestly. The next evening, the arena was full. Thousands of aliens filled the seats. Screens across the station broadcast the event live. The Korath commander stood at the center, his voice booming through speakers. "Today, a human accepts our challenge. Today, we see if they have courage or if they are nothing." The crowd roared. A gate opened on one side of the arena. Kim Dayan walked out. She wore simple clothes. She carried no weapons. She looked very, very small under those bright lights, but she walked with her shoulders back. She walked like she was entering her own backyard. The Korath commander looked down at her. "Human, do you understand what you face?" "Yep. Do you wish to speak final words before we begin?" Dan thought for a moment. "Yeah, actually." "Hey, Jiwoo." "I understands." Jiwoo jumped at hearing her name. "If I die, you can have my coffee collection. It's in my room under the bed." Someone in the crowd laughed. Then someone else. The tension broke just a little. Dayan smiled. Then she turned to face the first gate. "All right," she said to herself. "Let's see what you've got." The gate opened. Something growled in the darkness. Round one was about to begin. The first creature came out of the darkness like a nightmare made real. It was called a shrike cat by the Korath. It looked like a panther but larger, with 6 legs and teeth that glowed faintly in the arena lights. Its eyes locked onto Dayan immediately. It could smell her. It could hear her heart beating. The crowd went silent. Dayan stood very still. She did not run. She did not scream. She just looked at the creature with calm, steady eyes. The shrike cat circled her slowly. It was confused. Every other challenger had run by now. Running triggered its hunting instinct. Running meant prey. But this small human was not running. Dayan took a slow breath. She kept her body relaxed. She remembered what her grandfather had taught her about wild animals back home. Don't run. Don't panic. They want you to be scared. Don't give them what they want. The creature moved closer. Its breath was hot on her face. Dayan looked directly into its eyes. She did not blink. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The shrike cat made a sound of frustration. It circled again, then again. Finally, with a noise that sounded almost annoyed, it walked back toward its gate. The creature was trained to hunt prey. This human did not act like prey. It did not know what to do. The crowd erupted in noise. Half were cheering. Half were confused. The Korath commander leaned forward in his seat, his eyes wide. "She did not fight," one of his advisors said. "She did nothing." "No," the commander replied slowly. "She did everything. She refused to be afraid." Round 2 began before the cheering stopped. 3 smaller creatures ran into the arena. They were pack hunters, fast and vicious. They worked together to bring down prey 10 times their size. They surrounded Dayan in seconds. She turned slowly, keeping all 3 in sight. They snarled and snapped their teeth, moving closer with each step. Dayan started talking. "Hey there," she said, her voice calm and friendly. "Yeah, you're scary." "I know. Very impressive teeth." "Good job." The creatures paused. What was this sound? What was this tone? "I had a dog back home that looked at me like that when I forgot to feed him." "You hungry? Is that the problem?" She kept talking. Soft, steady words. The same voice she used with nervous cattle and scared horses. The same voice that could calm any animal if you gave it enough time. The pack hunters circled, but their attacks never came. They were waiting for fear. They were waiting for panic. Instead, they got a human talking to them like they were pets. 5 minutes passed. The creatures grew tired of waiting. They made confused sounds to each other. Then, one by one, they retreated to the edges of the arena. The crowd lost their minds. Jiwoo was crying. She didn't know why. Maybe relief. Maybe pride. Maybe just the impossible sight of her friend standing alone in an arena, completely calm, surrounded by creatures that could have torn her apart. 2 rounds, someone whispered. She survived 2 rounds. But the 3rd round was coming. And everyone knew what waited in that final gate. The DEVOURER. It had killed 200 challengers. Korath warriors, trained from birth, had died facing it. Entire species had lost their bravest fighters to this creature. The gate opened with a horrible screech of metal. The thing that came out was hard to look at. It was massive, taller than 3 humans standing on each other's shoulders. Its body was covered in thick armor. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of teeth that went back into its throat like a tunnel of death. It looked at Dae-Yun. Dae-Yun looked at it. "Wow," she said quietly. "You're a big boy, aren't you?" The creature screamed. The sound shook the arena. Some aliens in the crowd covered their ears. Others fled from their seats. Daeon did not move. "Reminds me of the saltwater crocs back home," she said, mostly to herself. "Uglier, though." The Devourer charged. 200 challengers had run from this charge. They had tried to dodge, to hide, to escape. Every single one had failed. Dan did something different. She charged back. She screamed as she ran, the loudest sound her body could make. She ran straight at the creature that had killed hundreds. She ran with her arms wide and her voice tearing through the air. The Devourer stopped in 10,000 years. Nothing had ever run toward it. In all its existence, every creature had fled. Its entire hunting strategy was built on fear and chase. What was happening? What was this? Dan grabbed a metal rod from the arena floor. It had broken off from some old structure. It was heavy and solid in her hands. The creature recovered. It opened its mouth and lunged forward. Daeon swung the rod with all her strength. It connected with the creature's snout with a crack that echoed through the arena. Nitrogen monoxide. She shouted. "Bad, sit down." She hit it again. And again. The Devourer made a sound no one had ever heard it make before. A sound of confusion. A sound of pain. A sound of something that might have been fear. It backed away. Daeon stood her ground, rod raised, breathing hard. Her arms were shaking. Her heart was pounding so fast she could hear it in her ears. But she did not show it. The Devourer looked at her for a long moment. Then it turned and retreated to its gate. The creature that had killed 200 warriors walked away from a 19-year-old farm girl. The arena was completely silent. Then the Korath commander stood up from his seat. He walked down the stairs, slowly, his heavy footsteps the only sound in the entire station. He entered the arena and approached Dan. She was still holding the rod. She did not lower it. The commander stopped in front of her. He was twice her height. He could have crushed her with one hand. Instead, he did something no Korath commander had ever done before. He bowed. Not a small bow. A deep bow, one that put his head lower than hers. A bow of complete and total respect. "You do not smell of fear," he said. "You do not taste of submission. In all my years, I have never seen anything like you. What are you?" Dan lowered the rod. Her arms were still shaking. "Australian," she said. "We've got worse stuff back home, mate." The commander stared at her. Then he laughed. A deep, rumbling laugh that filled the arena. He turned to face the crowd. His voice boomed through the speakers. "Today, we have witnessed something new. Today, a human has passed the path of teeth. From this moment forward, humans are no longer lesser species to the Korath. They are worthy of respect." The crowd exploded. Aliens of every species were cheering, shouting, celebrating. In the human section, Jiwoo collapsed into her seat, sobbing with relief. Dan walked out of the arena on shaking legs. She passed through the gate and found a quiet corner away from the cameras and the crowds. Then she sat down, put her head in her hands, and started shaking. She had been terrified. Every second, every moment, she had been more scared than she had ever been in her life. But she had not shown it, and that had made all the difference. 2 months had passed since the arena. Everything had changed. Humans walked differently on Station Horizon 7 now. They stood straighter. They spoke louder. They no longer moved to the side when Velthury passed in the hallways. The Korath had started calling humans little warriors. They invited human students to their training sessions. They asked about this place called Australia, where even the children were brave. For the Veltri, this was unacceptable. Sylvex watched from his private quarters as human influence spread through the station like a disease. His people had controlled the social order here for 300 years. They were the intellectuals, the leaders, the superior beings. Now a farm girl from a backwater planet was ruining everything. He needed to remind everyone of the natural order. Humans might be brave, but they were not smart. They were not sophisticated. They were animals with luck. Nothing more done. The announcement came on a morning when the sky screen showed perfect weather simulation. An academic tribunal would be held in the Grand Assembly. The topic: the inherent limitations of mammalian species. It was not really a debate. Everyone knew that. It was a public humiliation dressed in academic robes. Li Yuna received the formal invitation. Her face went pale. They want a human representative to argue against the topic, she said. If we refuse, we admit the topic is true. If we accept, they'll destroy whoever we send. Then, we need our best speaker, someone said. Everyone looked at each other. Who was the best human speaker? Who could stand against Sylvex, the genius of the Veltri, in a battle of words? I'll do it, Park Jiwoo said quietly. The room went silent. Jiwoo was smart, yes. Top grades in her classes. But she was also quiet, nervous, and easily intimidated. This was not a test of knowledge. This was a performance. Jiwoo, no, Yuna said. They'll eat you alive. Maybe. Jiwoo stood up slowly. But I've watched Dan for 2 months. I've watched her face things that should have killed her. I've watched her refuse to be afraid. She took a breath. It's time I learned how to do that too. The Grand Assembly was packed. Every species had sent representatives. Screens across the station broadcast the event. This was going to be the intellectual battle of the year. Sylvex stood on one platform, tall and perfect, his shell shining under the lights. His supporters filled half the room. Jiwoo stood on the opposite platform. She looked very small, very young, very human. Day Yun sat in the front row of the human section. She gave Jiwoo a thumbs up. The moderator, a neutral species called the Calving, announced the rules. Each side would present arguments. Each side would have time to respond. The audience would judge the winner. Sylvex went first. His voice was smooth and confident. Mammalian species, particularly humans, have biological limitations that cannot be overcome. Their brains are smaller in proportion to many superior species. Their lifespans are short. Their emotional responses cloud their judgment. These are not insults, they are facts. He presented data, charts, studies from Veltri scientists. Everything was designed to make humans look like clever animals, nothing more. The audience nodded along. The Veltri section clicked with approval. Jiwoo single quotes. S turn came. She looked at her prepared notes. Months of research. Careful arguments. Polite responses. Then she looked at Day Yun. Day Yun winked and mouthed 2 words. She'd be right. Something shifted in Jiwoo. Something clicked. She put down her notes. You call us limited, Jiwoo said. Her voice was quiet at first. You show charts about our brain size, our lifespan, our emotions. But you leave out something important. She stepped forward on her platform. How long did it take the Veltri to go from ground-dwelling creatures to space travelers? Sylvex's eyes flickered. That is not relevant to 2 million years, Jiwoo said. I looked it up. 2 million years from your first tools to your first starship. She paused. Humans did it in 10,000. The room went quiet. 10,000 years ago, we lived in caves. We hunted with sticks. We had nothing. And now we're here, on your station, having this debate with you. Jiwoo's voice grew stronger. You say our emotions cloud our judgment. But our emotions also drive us. Fear makes us creative. Love makes us brave. Anger makes us fight against impossible odds. You removed emotions from your evolution. You became cold and logical. And you know what you also became? She looked directly at Sylvex. Slow. Whispers spread through the crowd. No one had ever spoken to a Velthri like this. You measure worth by how well species follow your rules, Jiwoo continued. How well they bow. How well they submit. But we measure worth differently. We measure it by what you do when everything is against you. When you have no advantages. When you should lose, she pointed toward Dan. 2 months ago, one Australian farm kid walked onto the station. She had no special training. No genetic modifications. No political power. She had nothing except a refusal to be afraid. Jiwoo's voice filled the assembly. And in 2 months, she has shaken your entire world. She has made the Karth bow. She has made your species nervous enough to call this tribunal. One human girl. That's what you're really scared of, isn't it? Not our limitations. Our potential. Sylvex opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. For the first time in his brilliant career, he had no answer. Jiwoo wasn't finished. You asked if mammals have inherent limitations. Yes, we do. We're small. We're fragile. We don't live very long. But we have something you don't. She smiled. It was not a nervous smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally found her voice. We have absolutely nothing to lose. And that makes us the most dangerous species in the galaxy. She stepped back. The assembly was silent. Then the Milvacs started clapping. The small species that everyone ignored. They clapped their tiny hands together. The Korath joined in. Their massive claws made sounds like thunder. Other species followed. One by one. The applause spread through the room like a wave. Sylvex stood alone on his platform. His supporters had gone quiet. For the first time in 300 years, a Velthri had lost a debate. No, not just lost, been completely destroyed. The moderator called for a vote. It was not close. Jiwoo won by the largest margin in tribunal history. After the assembly ended, Dan found Jiwoo in a quiet hallway. The girl was leaning against a wall, shaking. That was amazing, Dan said. Absolutely amazing. I can't believe I did that. Jiwoo's voice was trembling. I can't believe I said those things. Why not? They were true. Jiwoo looked at her. I was so scared. Dan grinned. Yeah, I know. You did it anyway. That's the whole point. She put an arm around Jiwoo's shoulders. Come on. Let's go celebrate. I think you've earned a drink. They walked down the hallway together. Behind them, the galaxy's understanding of humans had changed forever. The end of the academic year came faster than anyone expected. Station Horizon 7 was different now. You could see it in small ways. The Milvacs walked with their heads higher. The Korath sat with humans at mealtimes, sharing stories and laughing at jokes they didn't fully understand. Even some younger Velthri had started breaking from their elders, sitting in mixed groups, asking questions they never would have asked before. The rigid hierarchy that had existed for centuries was cracking. Not breaking, not yet, but cracking. And everyone knew why. Kim Dayan sat in her small room, packing her bags. She didn't have much. Some clothes. Some books. A collection of alien snacks she wanted to bring home. The coffee she had searched for her entire time here. She never found any good enough. A knock came at her door. Come in, she said. Lee Huna entered, holding a tablet. You have 7 job offers. What? 7. Huna read from the tablet. The Korath want you as a cultural advisor. The Milvacs are offering you a position as their species' official human liaison. 3 different trade federations want you as a negotiator. The Galactic Council itself is asking if you'd consider a diplomatic role. Dan blinked. That's a lot. You changed things here, Dan. People noticed. Important people. Dan went back to packing. Nah. What do you mean, nah? I mean, nah. I'm not taking any of them. She folded his shirt carefully. I'm going home. Huma stared at her. You're going home? Back to Australia? After everything? Yeah. Dan smiled. I miss the beach. I miss the sky. I miss knowing that something might kill me, but at least it'll be something I recognize. But you could do so much here. You could change the entire galaxy. Maybe. Dan zipped up her bag. But I didn't come here to change the galaxy. I just came here for school. The rest was an accident. Huna didn't know what to say. This girl had been offered power that most species only dreamed of. She was turning it all down for a beach. You're impossible, Huna finally said. Yeah, I get that a lot. The graduation ceremony was held in the Grand Assembly. Every student who had completed their year stood on the main floor. Families and representatives filled the seats above. Park Jiwoo stood at the front. She had been elected as the first human student council president in the academy's history. Her parents watched from the human section, crying with pride. HYUNA was there too, announcing her new position, director of the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Program. She had created it herself, after watching what happened when different species actually talked to each other. When Dan's name was called, the entire assembly stood. Korath stomped their feet. Milvacs waved tiny flags they had made. Even some Velthari rose, though they looked uncomfortable about it. Dan walked across the stage with the same casual walk she had used on her first day, like she was just going to the shops. Like none of this was a big deal. The ceremony ended with speeches about the future of galactic unity. Dan didn't listen to most of them. She was thinking about the ocean back home, about her family's farm, about whether the old dog was still alive and waiting for her. Afterwards, as the crowds were leaving, someone approached her. Live X. He looked different now. Smaller somehow, though he hadn't physically changed. His confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like curiosity. May I speak with you? He asked. Dan shrugged. Sure. They walked to a quiet balcony overlooking the stars. Ships moved past in the distance, carrying beings to 1,000 different worlds. I have studied you for months, Silvex said. I have tried to understand what makes you different. You have no special training, no genetic modifications, no psionic abilities. By every measure my species uses, you should be unremarkable. Thanks, Dan said dryly. And yet, you terrified the Korath. You broke the Devourer. You inspired that girl to destroy me in public debate. Silvex's mirror eyes reflected the stars. How? What is your secret? Dan thought about it for a while. She watched a ship pass by, its lights blinking in the darkness. Where I'm from, she said slowly, everything's trying to kill you. The sun gives you cancer. The spiders can stop your heart. The jellyfish will kill you before you feel them sting. The ocean has sharks. The rivers have crocodiles. Even some of the trees are poisonous. She turned to look at Silvex. When you grow up like that, you learn something. Fear doesn't help. Panic doesn't help. The only thing that helps is staying calm, staying smart, and refusing to give up. But you were afraid, Silvex said. I saw you after the arena. You were shaking. Yeah, I was terrified. Dan smiled. But fear's a choice, you know? You can feel it without letting it control you. You can be scared and still move forward. That's what being brave is. Not the absence of fear. The refusal to let fear stop you. Silivex was quiet for a long moment. That is terrifying, he finally said. Yun laughed. Yeah, I know. Do all humans think this way? Not all, but enough. She looked back at the stars. And we're getting better at it. Every generation, we face new things that should scare us. And every generation, we figure out how to face them anyway. Silivex nodded slowly. I have much to think about. Good luck with that. Dan pushed off from the balcony railing. I've got a shuttle to catch. She started walking away, then stopped. Hey, Silivex? Yes, try being less of a jerk. It helps, she grinned. See you around. She walked off toward the shuttle bay. Silivex watched her go, his mirror eyes showing nothing of what he was feeling. The shuttle to Earth was small and crowded. Dan found a seat by the window and settled in for the long trip home. Outside, Station Horizon 7 grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among millions behind her. On the station, Jiwoo was starting her term as president. Hyuna was building bridges between species. The Korath were teaching humans their combat techniques. The Milvacs were standing taller. Everything had changed. And somewhere in the station, a young Korath child looked at the departing shuttle and asked their parent, "Will more Australians come?" The parent looked down at their child. A shiver ran through their scales. The humans say there's an entire continent of them. The child's eyes went wide. A whole continent? Millions of them. In a place where even the plants try to kill you. The child thought about this. Then, with the simple wisdom that only children have, they said, "We should probably be nicer to the humans." The parent nodded slowly. Yes, we probably should. The shuttle carrying Kim Daeun disappeared into the stars. Back to a little blue planet where the animals were deadly, the weather was extreme. And the people were absolutely insane enough to think that was normal. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And in the end, that was probably a good thing.